The Orioles certainly have some openings in their bullpen for 2026. Could any of them go to Kade Strowd, Rico Garcia, or Chayce McDermott? We'll talk about that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we continue what is loosely being called Reliever Week here at the Locked On Orioles podcast. We're diving into a lot of the guys who got some chances out of the Oriole bullpen in 2025 and talking about if they could fit into the relief plans in 2026. Today, we talk about Cade Stroud finally getting to the big leagues and flashing some really good stuff. We talk about Rico Garcia coming back to the O's and being Houdini out of some of these jams. And then what was not a lost season, but another kind of disappointing year for Chayce McDermott, but he's still here. He's no longer the Orioles' top pitching prospect, but can he still give the O's some value as he's officially been moved to the bullpen? We'll get to all their seasons, what went right, what went wrong, and the biggest storylines for 2026 coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. But first, I want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day, making Locked On now the #1 sports podcast network. So we begin on today's episode with Cade Stroud. I think the guy of the three that we'll talk about today that probably has the best chance to kind of stick in this Oriole bullpen long term. Stroud was finally able to make his major league debut in 2025 with the Orioles. 25 appearances out of the bullpen gave them 26 and a third innings and posted a 1.71 ERA. Now, it came with some good luck. It was a 2.77 expected ERA, a 3.40 FIP. He had a 23% strikeout rate to go with a fairly concerning 12.4% walk rate, although opponents hit just 176 against the 28-year-old right-hander Cade Stroud this season. So let's begin with what went right for Stroud. And the biggest what went right is that he was finally able to make his big league debut. Stroud was a 12th round pick by the Orioles out of West Virginia all the way back in 2019, the first draft under Mike Elias, and it was a long road for Stroud. He was kind of a bit of a surprise add to the Orioles 40-man roster after the 2024 season as they protected him from the Rule 5 draft, even after he posted a 6.8 ERA in 41 innings in AAA in 2024. But when you dug a little deeper than the ERA, you saw he had some of the best raw stuff of any relief pitcher in the system, had a 31% strikeout rate, had a ton of swing and miss, and the Orioles felt like that guy was going to get picked up by another team in the Rule 5, so decided to protect him. And technically, when Stroud debuted this season on May 18th, he became the first Orioles pitcher drafted by Mike Elias to make his major league debut by the Orioles. Now, technically, Brandon Young, who was an undrafted free agent by the O's after the shortened COVID 5-round draft in 2020, debuted in April before Stroud did, but because Young technically wasn't drafted, Stroud is that piece of trivia. And, he was pitching fairly well in 35 innings in AAA with a 4.15 ERA in different stints throughout the season. Again, came up and made his debut May 18th, then came back, was optioned, then came back to pitch 2 games for the Orioles in June, then was optioned, but he finally came back for good when he was recalled on July 26th. Of course, that was after the Orioles had traded away 4 arms at the deadline, and Felix Bautista had gotten hurt. So it was kind of a revamp of the entire Orioles bullpen there in late July. And Cade Stroud was one of those guys who was one of the new bullpen arms. And quite frankly, when you post a 1.71 ERA in your first big league season, it's going to be good stuff, but it's even better. The first 3 appearances for Stroud, right? The 1 in May, the 2 in June, kind of prior to when he fully cemented himself in the bullpen in late July. Those 3 didn't go great. You talk about from July 26th on when he was called up for good, he had a 1.23 ERA in 26 innings. Like, he was really, really good in that stretch. That was the 13th best ERA among qualified relievers in Major League Baseball from July 26th through the end of the season. And his raw stuff really stood out. Again, stuff plus a a number that kind of looks at just the general velocity, movement, arm angle, those things, not taking into account command or how the pitch actually plays or how much it gets hit. Just how nasty is this pitch? Averages around 100 for each pitch. He had a 137 stuff plus on the sweeper. That was the 7th best sweeper stuff-wise among all major league relievers who threw at least 20 innings this year. He had a 135 stuff plus on the curveball. That was also 7th among qualified relievers. He had a 116 stuff plus on the four-seam fastball, made him 16th in that group of relievers, sitting 96 with good induced vertical break, good riding action on that fastball. And adding that cutter that he has kind of makes him unique. It's a solid pitch, throws it around 92 miles an hour. But a couple years ago in the minors, when he was having so many command issues, was fully a reliever at that point, he added his cutter and just kind of realized, hey, I can command this cut fastball better than any pitch I have. And he started throwing it a lot. And he threw it 41% of the time during his big league debut season. Only 7 relievers who threw at least 20 innings in the majors this year threw a higher percentage of cutters than Cade Stroud did, because, Stroud uses a cutter as his main fastball. It's pretty rare in Major League Baseball to use a cutter as your main fastball. Obviously, we know, one of the greatest relievers of all time, Mariano Rivera, did that. But the other guys who throw a cutter this much, it's a pretty good group to be in. Kenley Jansen, Emmanuel Clase, at least on the field, Mason Fluharty, Camilo Doval. These are really good relievers who rely on good cutters. And because he had the cutter, it allowed him to have reverse splits, made him actually better against left-handed hitters than righties. And while it's a get-me-over strike one pitch, it's also a weapon for Stroud. And that makes him quite an intriguing reliever. It makes him unique. And guys who stand out generally have a better time sticking in big league bullpens. And with that stuff, that kind of interesting mix, nobody could square him up at all. He had a 1.5% allowed barrel rate, 3rd lowest among relievers through at least 20 innings this year. Lower than Tyler Rogers, who I was in love with this offseason, and I'm still upset signed with the Blue Jays, who doesn't allow any hard contact. 31.3% hard hit rate allowed by Cade Stroud, 16th lowest in baseball. 57% ground ball rate, 14th lowest. 86 mile per hour average exit velocity against him, 15 lowest. In his 20-some innings, he was, you could make a strong argument he was a top 20 reliever in Major League Baseball. Again, small sample size, but you like to see that moving forward. Now, there was some stuff that went wrong for Cade Stroud, and I think first and foremost, I might have called him Cade Povich. Cade Stroud, too many Cades. Why are there so many people named Cade? Too many Cades. Anyway, command is still not where you would want it to be. He came up through the minor leagues, and command was certainly, we'll call it an issue as he came through the minors. That last full season in AAA in 2024, he posted a 14% walk rate. You don't love that. That was his worst season walk rate-wise, but that's why it took him until age 27 in 2025 to debut, because he was running too high a walk rates in the minor leagues. And a 12.4% walk rate in the big leagues this year, kind of not where you want to be in your rookie season. He gets a good amount of chase, which is good, but guys may learn more and more to wait him out if he doesn't throw enough strikes. The big worry is this cutter really the only pitch in his repertoire that he can confidently and consistently command every time he throws it? And when he throws, the curveball or the sweeper or the four-seamer, it could be a strike sometimes, it could be down the middle sometimes, it could be way out of the zone sometimes. And we saw a little bit of that, right? In July, Stroud completely lost a fastball and in a scary moment hit George Springer in the head with that pitch. And Springer went down, left the game, missed some time from that. Stroud was clearly, shaken up by that pitch. It was impressive. He kind of bounced back after that and pitched well. But that was a moment where you're like, yeah, he's got the stuff, but does he know where it's going? And again, as I mentioned, there was also some good luck involved. You're not going to roll up in your first big league season with a 12% walk rate and post a 1.71 ERA without some luck on your side. It was a 3.40 FIP. That tells you, there was some batted ball luck. It was a 227 BABIP. That's batting average on balls in play. The league average around 280. It's not going to stick down that low. The ERA is pretty confidently going to be higher than 1.71 in 2026. But what are the storylines for him in 2026? It really is, even when that ERA does jump, which again, we know it's going to do just because of math, can he still stick in this Oriole bullpen? That's the real question. He's got options, so that could make it more likely the Orioles send him to AAA to keep someone who's out of options. I kind of compare him to someone like Colin Selby, who I'll talk about on a later episode this week, where Also has the good stuff, also hasn't fully proven himself in the big leagues, but Selby's out of options and Stroud has them. If it comes down to those two guys, maybe Selby gets the bump because then you can keep both of them in the system. But stuff-wise, he was the best in the Orioles bullpen. He was tied for the lead in raw stuff on this team with Seranthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto, who are both gone now. So Stroud's, and again, with Bautista injured, Stroud's basically the number one stuff guy behind Ryan Helsley now in the Oriole bullpen among the guys who are carryovers. I think he's got the stuff. I think he's got the mix to overcome the command issues and stick in this Orioles bullpen for most of the year here in 2026. We'll see if he's going to be more of a high leverage guy or more of kind of middle innings, middle reliever guy. But I think he could certainly be one of the breakout arms, not just for the Orioles, but in Major League Baseball in the bullpen in 2026. So that's Stroud. Next up is a guy who has a little bit more big league time. But some of the magic acts he pulled for the Orioles last season were absurd. Let's break down Rico Garcia coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was shocked at what Rocket Money showed me. I was paying for multiple different subscriptions that I wasn't using. I completely forgotten about. It's already saved me money, and it's automatic transaction categorization. It's a game changer. I can finally see exactly where my money goes every month. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. One more time, rocketmoney.com/locked on. So from Cade Stroud, we move over to Rico Garcia, who rejoined the Orioles on waivers at some point in 2025. And for the O's, he was pretty good. 20 outings, 19 innings for the Orioles. He posted a 2.84 ERA with a 4.03 FIP. He was able to throw out a 24% strikeout rate to a 7% walk rate. Opponents did hit 276 against him, so he got a little bit lucky, which the FIP and the expected ERA show for Rico Garcia. But it was overall a good season because he also pitched for the Mets and briefly for the Yankees this year, and overall had a 3.15 ERA in 34 1/3 big league innings. So let's start with what went right for the 32-year-old right-handed pitcher Rico Garcia. It was that he finally found his footing in Major League Baseball. Garcia, who debuted with the Colorado Rockies in 2019, the team that drafted him the 30th round all the way back in 2016, he's bounced around since then in the big leagues. He's pitched for 7 different teams since that debut, and that includes 2 stints with the Orioles. He gave the O's 8 innings out of the bullpen back in 2022, and then found his way back here in 2025, was DFA'd 3 times last season, twice by the Mets and once by the Yankees. Despite, having a 2.13 ERA in 13 innings with the Mets, he was still DFA'd. The Orioles claimed him off waivers on August 5th. There was obviously bullpen spots to be had with the Orioles losing 5 of their relievers, and Garcia was finally able to settle in. I mentioned posting those good numbers down the stretch with the O's, and the Orioles really did just kind of throw him into the fire in terms of pitching in high leverage spots. His leverage index from the time he joined the Orioles to the end of the year was second on the O's, only second to Keegan Aiken, who we talked about back on Monday's episode, getting so many 9th inning shots. But his leverage index, I'm looking at the whole season, it was even higher than Felix Bautista's, who was the closer until he got injured again in July. And this really began, the Orioles gave him 3 appearances early to kind of get his feet wet. And then in his 4th outing with the O's, they said, go get him, kid. Bases loaded, no outs at Fenway, Orioles leading the Red Sox 3-1 in the bottom of the 8th inning. And in comes Rico Garcia trying to clean up a mess. And what does he do? Strikes out Jarren Duran, strikes out Trevor Story, strikes out Masataka Yoshida to somehow escape that jam and keep the Orioles in the lead. Then they're like, all right, you can do that. Let's do it again. Bases loaded, 1 out in the 7th in San Diego, up 5-2 in September. You strike out Luis Arraez, who never strikes out, and then you get Manny Machado to ground out to end the inning. He only allowed 3 total hits in all of the high leverage spots he pitched in. He had a 136 batting average against him in high leverage outings in 2025. And the big change was his raw stuff just looked very, very different than it did his last time with the Orioles 3 years ago or with really any other team before 2025. He had never had a stuff plus above 95 in his career. He had a 105 in his stretch with the Orioles. His four-seamer, he was throwing at 96. He had 19.7 inches of induced vertical break on that pitch. That's kind of the rising action the fastball has. Fourth highest induced vertical break riding action of all pitchers in Major League Baseball in 2025. That's pretty good. Add to it a really good curveball, this kind of interesting changeup that drops less, literally of all changeups that were thrown in the majors of 2025, no changeup dropped less than Rico Garcia's. It's almost like the classic Bugs Bunny changeup is what he was throwing. Like, it doesn't have a lot of movement on it. It's just that looks just like the fastball until it stops in midair almost. It's a very unique pitch, and it's pretty nasty. And it leads him to getting a lot of soft contact, inducing a lot of ground balls when he's not getting swings and misses. And when you combine that with the fact that he threw strikes, right? Only a 7% walk rate, pretty good for a reliever. He felt like he had the whole package in that 2-month stretch with the Orioles at the end of the season. And, they did come to an agreement with him to pay him a little more money than he would have gotten the major league minimum to hopefully, if they do have to DFA him at any point, he could stick around. But man, oh man, was it a fun stretch to watch from Rico Garcia. And there were still some things that went wrong, right? What went wrong for him? There was a little bit of a home run problem because when he has that high ride fastball, when those guys give up fly balls, the spin of the fastball allows the ball to backspin more, carry more in the air, and it leads to giving up more home runs. Just kind of the science of throwing that pitch. It's the give and take of throwing a fastball with that much ride on it. That's usually the drawback of those guys. And he had almost a 19% home run to fly ball rate. That was the highest on the Orioles after the trade deadline. So that's a little bit concerning. And nothing can be more backbreaking for a reliever than giving up a home run in a key spot. Now, he only gave up a few of them, and they were mostly solo shots, which was helpful. But that's something that can doom you when you pitch late in games. And also, that kind of stuff is going to lead to your underlying numbers being a little shakier. I mentioned, despite the ERA under 3, a 4.42 expected ERA, do the StatCast stuff. And, he ran a 340 BABIP, batting average on balls in play. It's a 280 league average. When you're 60 points above, you're probably getting some good luck, I would say, or you could argue bad luck for him maybe, but the quality of contact, it bounces back on fourth and how you look at that for Rico Garcia. So the question is for him, biggest storylines for 2026 are the changes he made. And really it started with the Mets and then continued with more time with the Orioles after coming over on waivers. Like, are those changes for real for Rico Garcia? He'd thrown 35 big league innings over 6 major league seasons and been pretty terrible with much worse stuff heading into 2025. And then at age 31, he looked like a completely different pitcher last year. So now at 32, do we think he can keep this up? I mean, he can give you multiple innings out of the pen. He can get lefties and righties out. He's got that intriguing stuff. He certainly has that ex-dog in him, seeing him get out of jam after jam late in the year with the Orioles. So I tend to think he can. Now relievers can always have these good 2-month stretches, then completely blow up. And if it looks shaky again, it does hurt that Garcia is out of minor league options. So if the Orioles want to take him off the roster, they'd have to DFA him, put him on waivers, and another team with that kind of stuff is absolutely going to swipe him up and claim him. So I think because he's out of options, if he's healthy, I feel like it almost guarantees he will be on the Orioles opening day roster in the bullpen. But the question is, when he gets those chances early in the year, will it look like it did down the stretch last year, or will it look like it did earlier in Garcia's career? And that's going to decide whether he can stick with this team in the bullpen being out of options, or if he does find his way onto the waiver wire because he kind of reverts back to the old version of Rico Garcia. Though I'd like to see him stick around because some of that stuff really, really stands out. And again, you want guys to stand out in your bullpen. Just like I talked about with Stroud, Garcia has some of those qualities as well. Two really interesting adds to this Orioles bullpen that could certainly help the team this upcoming season. But the last guy we're going to talk about today, I think Orioles fans for a long time have thought he'd help the team way more than anyone named Cade Stroud or Rico Garcia would, and that is Chayce McDermott, who just a year ago now, was considered the top pitching prospect in the Orioles minor league system. Now there's a question of whether or not he's going to stay with the team. So let's talk about the current situation of Chayce McDermott to finish off the show, coming up next. Chayce McDermott. Let's talk about it. It's a weird situation right now. Before we get to him, do want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. You already live your team every day. Now, take it up a level and go ad-free. That's right. Locked On Orioles with no ads. Join the Everydayer Club today. Get Locked On Orioles with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, chat with me and other Orioles fans about the team, really anytime, and you get more all for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonorioles.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more about joining the Everydayer Club. So Chayce McDermott, I looked back at the Orioles preseason 2025 prospect rankings over at FanGraphs. McDermott was number 3 in the system and the number 1 ranked pitcher in this system. The right-hander is now 27 years old, and there are a lot more questions than answers for him. In terms of what his season looked like, he had 4 appearances for the Orioles this year, 8 2/3 innings. He had a 15.58 ERA. 12 hits, 15 earned runs, 9 strikeouts, 12 walks, 3 homers, and a hit batter. Not great in his second try in the big league. Spent most of his year in AAA. Let's start with what went right for Chayce McDermott. At the very least, he did get back to the big leagues. He made 1 big league start in Miami against the Marlins for his major league debut late in the 2024 season, then suffered another injury to his shoulder and was out for the remainder of the year. Now, he returned to the big league club in May with the Orioles desperately in need of pitching like they were early in the season. He made 1 start, then he made kind of 1 follower bulk relief appearance after an opener in 1 week. Neither went great, and he went back down to AAA Norfolk. He finally did return in September, and this time as a reliever, made 2 appearances out of the Oriole bullpen, and that was that. So at least he got a little bit of a bigger chance, but didn't go so great, as we'll talk about. The good thing is the Orioles pretty much officially moved him to the bullpen in 2025. This seemed to be something that was coming because he's had good stuff, but the command has been shaky. The injury history has been shaky. That always feels like a pitcher you're just going to eventually move to the bullpen. It's kind of the DL Hall thing. Righty DL Hall probably is Chayce McDermott. Orioles moved him to the pen in AAA after the All-Star break. He was still a starter before the break, moved him to the pen after the All-Star break. First 2 outings were horrible out of the bullpen. Allowed 6 earned runs over 2 1/3 innings. After that, he settled into his new role. 14 1/3 innings, 2 runs, 11 hits, 18 Ks, 6 walks, and no homers out of the AAA Norfolk bullpen. His fastball jumped up to 95. He added a new cutter to go along with the changeups and the breaking balls that he already throws, and he seemed to be looking good. So the Orioles, again, gave him that shot as a relief pitcher in September. But of course, there was much that went wrong. First, there were still injuries for McDermott. He had a chance, I think, to make this team out of spring training, maybe as a reliever or maybe as a starter, but there were injuries. He had a lat sprain in spring training, started the year on the injured list, didn't begin his rehab assignment until April 27th, so ended up missing over a month. Then he kind of bounced through the year, went from starter to reliever, came up to the big leagues, made 2 appearances, and then was placed on the bereavement list on September 19th. So, best to his family. I don't think we ever heard quite the reasoning for that, but he never came back. The bereavement list, you're usually gone for 2 or 3 days. There were still 10 days left in the season. We thought he'd be back. He never returned because after the bereavement list, he immediately went on the injured list with back discomfort, and McDermott's season was over after just those 2 relief appearances in September. And even if it was just 8 2/3 innings overall in the big leagues last year, the stat line is ERA. 15.58 ERA is ugly and disgusting. Only 4 big league pitchers threw at least 8 innings last year with a higher ERA. Unfortunately, one of them was, of course, Kyle Gibson. However, that first relief outing he had when he was called up in September in Chicago against the White Sox, September 16th, first true big league relief outing, stat line was a bit skewed. He walked the first batter, but then he went ground out, strikeout, and with a runner on third and 2 outs, he got a strikeout. Should have ended the inning, put up a 0. But Samuel Basallo, who's still going through some growing pains as a defensive catcher, had a drop third strike that really should have been blocked and been an out at first. Instead, ball goes to the backstop, run scores, runner gets first on drop third strike, inning continues. Should have been over with a 0. Instead, the next 2 batters single. McDermott comes out, couple more hits. He ends up getting charged with 4 runs when it should have been 0. The next outing against the Yankees was pretty ugly. He walked 3 batters and allowed a few of them to score, so that wasn't as good. But the ERA was really inflated because of a dropped third strike. Now, and again, I'm not going to judge him off of just 2 major league relief appearances in September on a team that's out of it, and especially when he was then dealing with something going on the bereavement list, especially when he looked so good in that relief role in AAA late in the year in August and September before he got that call up again. So what's the storylines for Chayce McDermott in 2026? I feel, again, it's a possibility the Orioles could stretch him back out as a starter in spring training, but I feel like we're pretty likely at the point now where he is a full-time reliever. Can he be good at that is the question in the big leagues. We saw him be good at it in AAA. Can he succeed as a reliever? There's been so many injuries, so many questions to starting pitcher, top pitching prospect to this. I mean, there's still a lot in there. If McDermott can just stay on the field, but this is a make or break season. I mean, he is now 27 years old, and this is his final year with minor league options. In 2027, you won't be able to just freely send him back and forth from AAA. So this is the last year where he has roster flexibility. He's going to need to prove something this year. He could be DFA'd by the Orioles at some point. That's not out of the question at all. I mean, the stuff is interesting. It's a fastball with good ride, mid-90s, curveball, splitter, added that cutter at the end of last year. It all should play up. Already was playing up velo-wise on the fastball out of the bullpen. And we know there are openings in this Orioles relief corps right now. I mean, it's not out of the question that if McDermott looks great in Sarasota, he could even maybe win an opening day bullpen spot. I think it's more than likely he still begins the year in the Norfolk bullpen and continues to work as a reliever. And it looks like he's maybe made some changes this offseason. There was an article that the guys over at Orioles on the Verge found on the Indiana RBI baseball website that interviewed McDermott back in December about him working with an independent pitching coach this offseason. He's kind of been tinkering his mechanics. We'll have a link to that story in the show notes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Most of what he talked about was focusing on not having his chest kind of fly open so much as he finishes his delivery. That should help him keep his command on point. He feels good about his velocity and his stuff, at least as of December. So we shall see. I mean, he is a huge question mark right now. I put him in the category, maybe, a hitter like Heston Kjerstad kind of falls into this category for the Orioles, where it's like former top prospect, still not old, still with the organization, but injuries and other things have just left this giant gray cloud about what this player could be. And if McDermott gives the Orioles nothing this year, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, the Orioles shouldn't be, and they really aren't counting on anything from Chayce McDermott. He's not, to me, he's not really in the future plans for the Orioles anymore. He's more of a, if he pops finally, it's a great plus. It's a huge addition. It's a nice surprise rather than something you're counting on. So it's not like this is a make or break year for the Orioles, but it's truly, I think, make or break for Chayce McDermott's career. It's put up or shut up time for him to try and stay on the field. And I think he has the goods to be at least a solid big league reliever. We shall see. Again, he's on the outside looking in for the opening day bullpen right now, but he's got options, and the O's are going to use him this year. And it's all going to come down to, if he's healthy, can he come up big in some of these relief spots, and where will he go from there with the Orioles? But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. If you have thoughts on Kade Strowd, Rico Garcia, Chayce McDermott, let me know how many of those 3 do you think will be in the Orioles opening day bullpen. Let me know right here in the YouTube comments. If you're a listener, also make sure to follow, subscribe to the show. If you could leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps us out as well. And if you want to talk some ball, talk Orioles, have some mailbag questions, as I mentioned on last week's episode, if you need anything for your youth baseball or local little league, looking for coaches, volunteers, equipment, donations, would be happy to spread the word here on this show. So do all those things. You can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. I will be back later this week, either Thursday or Friday, with one more episode. We may do some more reliever stuff, looking at maybe my favorite breakout pick for this season, Yarmiel Geraldo. But of course, if there is other news, we will get to that as well. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.